Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today I'm going to be answering some of your questions. That's right. So I've got a form down below that says, submit a topic. It's pretty big. You can submit articles, you can submit blurbs of questions, you can submit your hate mail. It is whatever. It is completely anonymous. All I ask for is whatever question or subject you would like me to talk about, and it's been a while since I've looked in there. And I clicked in there. And so I want to answer some of the questions in there or talk about some of the topics in there today. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, which was this Monday, we bask in your creative genius. Sometimes they're obscure prompts. Sometimes they are very community related, like this one. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter to the Fresh Meat feature, and the first chapter will be right here on the channel, showing off that beautiful cover to hopefully help more readers find your work, because you worked hard on that book, and I want to do what I can to help facilitate people knowing that it exists. Sometimes people pick up the books, sometimes they don't. I know that if a book speaks to me, I will either add it to my to-read list or I will immediately go and buy it. And a couple of the books that I've actually reviewed on this channel starting last year have been from the Fresh Meat feature, and I have a couple more that'll eventually come up when I catch up on my reading list. But it's a great way to start discovering new authors and brand new ideas that are fresh. You guys are incredibly creative, and there are so many different genres in that bucket that even if one story doesn't do it for you, maybe the next. For me, I've known when I've read the first chapter if that book is going to do it for me, is going to be in my feelings. And so far I have not been wrong. People are very good at selling their first chapter and the vibes. And so it is a grab bag of difference. What the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they are available in the description down below. At any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. With that said, let's get into your guys' questions, because we had a lot of them, and I don't know how many we're going to get into today. So I have this form that if you want me to talk about something specifically, then you just submit it here and hopefully someday I can get to them. So I'm going to cover a couple of them now. The first of which I wanted to cover here says, hello, I am making a presentation for NJLA, which I assume / I looked it up and I think that it's the New Jersey Library Association. Correct me if I am wrong. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be my guess. And would like to use one of your videos as a source if we decide to officially put the presentation out into the world. Would be open access. We will credit you in the Google Scholar, etc. for citation. I'd just like to know what your qualifications are for having this channel. Are you a libraria? I see you are a writer, involved in any organizations, etc. Thanks. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that I don't think anybody needs to have any specific qualifications in order to have a channel. I know that might be insane to say. Most of what I do here is I just read a book, I tell you what I think about the book, or I read topics or share topics, and then I tell you what I think about those topics. It's literally just having an opinion. I don't think anybody needs any qualifications to do that, just like you don't need qualifications to run a book club. You don't need qualifications to leave a book review, and nobody should. Everybody who reads a book is going to approach the book with their own specific perspective and thoughts, and then come away with something different. And that's what makes book discussion interesting, is to have those different perspectives and is to discuss those things. And some things will be picked up from a book implicitly, and some things will be picked up explicitly. And so that means that readers may take things from a book that are not specifically said, or there's an implicit way and an explicit way in order to write. And if you're not sure what that means, it means some things are said straight, like directly, and other things are in the subtext or are unspoken, or you kind of are reading between the lines. That would be implicit, implied. And we all take different signals from different things based on personal experiences and education and background and all of that stuff. So I really don't think that you need to have any qualifications in order to have a channel that talks about anything. I think that in a lot of spheres with just having discussion, people try to make it so that you look like an idiot if you have an opinion. And they try to scare you into not being able to talk by saying, I'm going to come after you and like make you drag you as an idiot if you say anything. That's one of the reasons why psychologists' least favorite job is testifying in trial, because the job of the opposing lawyer is to make you look incompetent and irreliable and unreliable and basically bad at what you do, because they need to make you look like you're not an authority in the thing that you are actually an authority in. And some psychologists, that's not saying that psychologists are always correct when they're testifying in court, because there are ways to get things wrong. You're also working for your client. Like, it's a whole big thing. If you look at so many discussions, whether it's politics, whether it's books, whether it's something personal, faith, people try to undermine you and make you look like an idiot. And I've even had that happen to me already. I've had it in my comments. I've had people come after me just for having an opinion, especially on AI, and to try to find anything to delegitimize an opinion instead of just having a discussion. So, you might be able to say, I disagree with that. This is why I disagree with that. But to push somebody to have qualifications, especially on something so non-serious as a book review channel, is kind of funny, but fair. If you want the serious, super serious answer to that, I have a bachelor's degree in theater, a master's degree in creative writing, and a master's degree in forensic psychology. I've also been writing for probably more than 20 years, though I'm not going to count a bunch of the stuff that I did in school when I was, a single digit, because that's kind of ridiculous. But I have been professionally writing and training for about 15 years. I have 5 books published, a 6th coming out later this year. I have an award from the FWA, that is the Florida Writers Association. I've also been a member of the Florida Writers Association for about 6 years. I was a form of assistant. There weren't any formal titles because it was a local writing group, but I was one of the main assistants / secondaries at a local writing group a couple years ago, and I have been in a variety of other workshop groups. You may not see me actually running an editing and critique business. I do offer it on an individual basis privately to people. Though with a master's degree, that's pretty much what I need to teach in a university setting. So like, I just don't personally believe in university, having gone through the process. And I don't believe in people having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars in order to have these discussions, when a majority of learning writing in university is going to seminars, discussing content, and then also reading books and annotating books and basically deconstructing the content to then pull it into how you're doing it. So I kind of just show people the way that I do things to hopefully help teach different ways to look at their own work. This question is, what do you think separates good prose from bad prose? There are many ways in which you can do good prose and bad prose. There are also different preferences for good prose and bad prose. Like, I know some people that slave over writing specifically poetry style prose, and I know people that try to keep it clip. I think good prose for me is something that is easy to read, something that captures the characters or the narrative's voice and keeps it straight, something that lets you imagine and imply in some cases, some things that paint the picture for you. It's harder to abstractly describe good and bad prose because there are just multiple ways to do it. And if I saw it, then I could say, ooh, I like those prose, or, oh, those are bad prose. I think bad prose is easy to find. It's often repetitive. Oh my gosh. When I was reading Amygdala just recently, and I don't know, you're probably not going to see any of those fight scenes, but it got into like, you would be reading it and it would have the same pattern again and again and again and again and again and again in the prose, especially in the fight scenes, where it would have like, Lucy punched a person, making their nose bleed. Person swung to the right, dancing away from the moves. Lucy followed, pursuing like a creature of the deep. And it would just do that sentence, comma, dependent clause with an ing over and over and over again. And it's enough that you notice. I've also noticed bad prose, especially with how much I do live reading on Friday nights, because some books are just so much easier to read than others. I highly recommend Vlad's book. I cannot even do him justice because I can't pronounce his last name. I'm so sorry, Vlad. But Vladimir's book, Order of the Spirits Initiation. The first one is Order of the Spirits Fragments. His prose are very easy to read. And that's not to say that they are uncomplicated. That's not to say that they are plain. His fight scenes are very well done. And probably one of the places I would say where his prose shine. And fight scenes are really hard to keep motion going. I know that when I'm going through my fight scenes or action scenes during revision or during editing, I have to pay a lot of attention to how I'm going from sentence to sentence, trying not to make it sound repetitive. Another good example of good prose is Dan Simmons. I haven't read Hyperion, but I have read Carrion Comfort, so I highly recommend you check out Carrion Comfort if you want to kind of examine prose. And my suggestion for you, if you want to study good and bad prose, and this is one of the things that we do on the Discord server as well in the reading chat, because we just go through books together and talk about them as we're posting blurbs. And so one of the things that you can do for yourself, one of the best things that you can do for yourself is when you're reading, highlight stuff that you think that you really like. So if you're reading through something and then you read prose and you go, oh my gosh, I really like that, highlight it as a resource. So later if you're writing, you can know that you have a reference. But then open up a Word document, open up a journal, and try to explain what it is that you like about that paragraph or those prose. Like, try to describe what it is that you feel that makes you drawn to it. And it might sound really silly, but actually thinking through why you're responding to those prose, why you feel that they are superior to other prose, will actually help you better understand how to do it yourself. And the same thing can be said for bad prose. If you read a book and you go, oh, I don't like this, I'm not sure why, it's just difficult to read. I mean, even saying it's difficult to read, I'm stumbling on it, it's sounding repetitive, those things can actually stick with you. So I highly recommend that if you want to study prose, just pick up a book, highlight, and then word through yourself as to why you're responding to those words the way that you are. The same thing can be done with any sort of element. If you want to talk about character, highlight what you like about a line that shows characterization. Highlight a line that shows description, and then talk yourself through why you like that description or why you don't like that description. Is it efficient or is it inefficient? Because you can have super long descriptions that are efficient and super long descriptions that are inefficient, just as you can have short descriptions of people that are super efficient and short descriptions that are not efficient. And the length of description can also be a tool in showing somebody's importance or in showing a narrative. Like, if somebody doesn't describe any of the characters that are around them or kind of describes them blankly, or like in the case of American Psycho, where Patrick Bateman is constantly noting people by the brand names that they're wearing, it shows something about the character, because even the way that you describe other characters shows characterization of the narrative character. And that's especially more important if you're doing first person. But if you're doing a consistent third person, which you generally should be doing, the descriptions should match for the characterization of that third person narrator, because the third person narrator is still a character themselves, whether it's a close third and it's inspired by the characters in your story, or an omnipresent third. They're going to want to be they're going to want to be the same style until you hit a point where you switch perspectives basically and can change to another. But that's what I do, and that's what I did in graduate school. Is I mostly read things. I mean, I had This is the spoiler alert. Grad school for creative writing is mostly seminars, at least based on my experience, is mostly seminars where you're maybe sitting there for an hour and you're talking over a specific thing, or you're exercising in a specific way. I still remember one of the seminars that we did that probably stuck with me the most was with a poet, because it was in something that I suck at the most. And we were just supposed to sit there and write similes, like just make up whatever similes and then run with it. And don't care about if it sounds stupid, because a lot of us spend so much time in our heads trying to make something sound good and trying to make something sound special. But if you just let your mind go, if you just set a timer and then let your mind go crazy and then just keep going down a line as you just think of whatever you think about, you're eventually going to strike a gold. And that's another way to think of similes as well, as when you're writing them, like, her hands were knives. Okay, how were her hands knives? Like, what does that mean? Because any choice that you make, you need to think through what it is that you're saying. Her hands were knives. That means that what? They're sharp, they're pointed, they might be dangerous. And so then that's where you're going to start using that mindset. And so your strongest tool in becoming a better writer in any sort of way is by studying what people do that you like and what people do that you don't like. And that also comes from reading other people's work, whether it's to critique it or it's published work. You learn so much, and I cannot stress enough how much reading actually helps. Reading can also help in you receive feedback that you're like, well, this is silly. I don't see the problem with this. And then you read it, you read the criticism that you got in someone else's work, and you're like, I get it now, because that person is approaching my work like I'm approaching this person's work. And I see why they're complaining now, because Dead End Drive had that issue. And I know that Dead End Drive is imperfect because that's my first story, but you know what? I love that book for what it is, for what it became, and for what it allowed me to explore. And it was always a dark comedy, but in its earlier phase, I constantly traded out voice of character to make jokes because I constantly just wanted to do zingers in the narrative, in the character dialogue. And so then the characters ended up losing personality. And I actually had a mentor who mentioned that. And so you have to choose whether you want to maintain personality or do the sitcom jokes. And if you do the sitcom jokes or the causticness, and I mentioned this with Crimson Wren, that if you choose the jokes, if you choose the snarkiness for every single character, then you're going to lose personality. And so maybe you might get a hee-hee, but then you have to remember that that's going to stick with specific readerships as well. And the readerships that want character are not necessarily going to like your characters as much because you're losing your characters by making them all sound the same. And that's a problem that I find with a lot of books. And I wonder how much of the same voice issue comes from people not wanting to commit to a character. It's like sometimes it can be because an author is afraid to show a certain type of character because they don't want it to be assumed that that character is their personality, and that happens a lot. But then they end up making all of the characters sound just like them or just the same or the same and just like them. And then what do you do with that? I mean, this got pretty far from good prose and bad prose. But as far as I'm concerned, there's no one way to do good prose or bad prose. Best way to study prose is to read widely, look for prose that you like, mark down prose that you don't like, and describe why that is. But I think good prose can be the imagery that you see it's usually fairly clip and direct. It's not long-winded, at least in my opinion. I like stuff that is not overly described, like goes on for pages and pages and pages. Like you want to be specific in your descriptions, but not necessarily long for the things that I like. They can be atmospheric. It can be direct. It can also let you imagine, and it carries emotion. It's easy to read. It's variable. And so I think that there are a lot of different things to use, and also consider your genre that you're writing in and your reader expectation or your audience that you hope to have. And that will also change the approach to your fiction. Not all prose is super, super lacy or super, super flowery, especially not like I've mentioned this in other videos when talking about YA, and there's this assumption that if it's adult fiction, then it must have complicated prose. It must have intricate descriptions, but not all does. If you look at thrillers, if you look at a lot of mysteries, not all mysteries and not all thrillers, if you look at a lot of action books, some of them can have really straightforward writing. And so I would just say study the genres that you want to read and even study outside of the genres. You'll notice the books that I review on this channel or talk about on this channel vary widely in the way that they're written, in the genre, in the target audience. And as much as I may not enjoy everything that I read here, I do get to taste a lot of different authors and a lot of different voices and a lot of different perspectives. And ultimately, I think that my writing is better for it. Though I should probably, hopefully, read more stuff that falls into my genre. I'll get back to reading for me eventually. I hope that helps. If you have further questions on good prose versus bad prose in the comments, let me know. But I would have to pull together a video specifically highlighting what I think are good prose and bad prose, and I didn't prepare with clips for that. So I also think bad prose are repetitive in a bad way. That's not to say repetition cannot be used in a good way, because every way you form a sentence, every way you form a paragraph is just a way to create a tool for emotion, for speed, And so you can use repetition to bring a point home. But if you've ever read ACOTAR, you know what bad repetition looks like. Personally, I also find that a lot of people who use italics for thoughts end up repeating what was literally just said in the text paragraph, which is then not only repetitive, but it feels like it's talking down to the reader because it's this up here was implied. Now it's just straight telling you what to think. And so I think that can end up being bad prose too. Anyway, I'm going to put a note in to start gathering what I think are good prose and bad prose. And at a later date, I will do a video kind of sharing with you what I like in prose and what I don't like in prose. And again, it's all personal preference because your style is going to be inspired by the writers that you like and the types of writing that you like. And there is not one good way to do it, which is why all I can do is show you what I like and what I'm drawn to. And hopefully that'll help you maybe find stuff that you like and that you can go investigate more of to develop your style and your skill set more. Because that's really what it's all about. This comment says, I've been absolutely devouring your content recently, and while I love hearing you ripping the Shadow of the Conqueror, it made me realize that I legitimately am worried that while I want to start writing, I have a campaign setting book that I want to write, my TTRPG shenaniganery, there we go. Great word, that I might simply create something so intensely tone deaf. I have characters I've designed who are objectively horrible people, and that's the point of them to begin with, but I worry about writing them out and it coming across the way Dalen does. I just want to know if you had any thoughts on how to manage this fear so that I can start writing without second guessing what I'm doing so intensely. So I think at any point, for the majority of us, we are going to write characters that are downright terrible people. And it's not really realistic in writing, just like it's not realistic in the world, that terrible ideas and terrible people are always going to have somebody to tell them that they're wrong. And especially if they are kind of dominating everything. It's going to be up to kind of the reader and the author and their relationship to accept that sometimes things are just imperfect and that people are going to exist and there's not necessarily going to be punishment. Sometimes there is punishment and sometimes it's more subtle punishment. Like at the end of American Psycho. Look, there are so many good... I know. I pick books. So the first things first. So when you're writing, there is a balance that needs to be struck between listening to feedback that is meaningful, that is going to help you craft the story and the characters that you want to tell, and not giving a crap about what other people think, because some people are just not going to like what you're doing. And that's also fine. Some people are just going to absolutely hate it. And that's also fine. But you have to mentally prepare yourself for that. So this is kind of an aside and possibly a hot take. Prepare for the hot take. But I was watching a channel that was reviewing some dark romances recently. I think she was called The Weird Book Club. And she talked about Haunting Adeline, which is one of the most popular dark romance books on TikTok. Haunting Adeline was accused of being anti-Semitic, and I think Jay Kristoff was also accused of being anti-Semitic for having blood magic, blood rituals in their stories at some point. It was related back to blood libel, and then that's considered anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic. Then there was a moment in the Weird Book Club's review for Satan's Affair where in the book it mentioned the character had a hooked nose. That was all that it said, a hooked nose and then like a Romanian accent. And she asked if that was anti-Semitic, just the mention of a nose. And so people will say things and opine on things and then expect you to change it because they are offensive. And then just yesterday, I swear I have a point. Just yesterday, I saw somebody else on Goodreads post a review and then a comment because she was getting so much trash talk from other people on a book review that she made saying, hey, this is a me issue. I just don't like this book and I had to DNF this because this was offensive to me as a Christian. And it was because in the story, the male love interest, it was because in the story, when the female and main characters were having sex, the female like cried out to God and the male character said, he's not going to save you. And if he came down here and tried, I would nail him to the cross again. And so the reader said, you know, that crosses a line for me. It is disrespectful to the savior of my religion. It is just crosses a line of disrespect to me and I can't finish this. It was just no. And so she got jumped on for saying that she was offended by that. People were calling her way too sensitive. Look, I think people can respond however they want to your content. Sometimes you are going to write insensitive things, or you're going to write characters who are insensitive, or you're going to write characters who are offensive, and that's fine. People can be offended by things or have a negative response to things. I think it's when you start trying to dictate how that other person, be it the author trying to dictate to the reader how to respond, or the reader trying to dictate what the author is allowed to do because of your personal response. Like, look, guys, get ready. I am reading a book right now that was sent to me, and it has one of the main characters is very much like my father, and he cheated on his wife, and then he was kicked out of the house, and now he's living in a motel, and he keeps swearing at his wife and his 2 daughters when he is the one that cheated. And he was like, what was I supposed to do? I'm a man. I don't know, maybe don't cheat on your wife. And he's sitting over here going, well, she's never worked a day in her life. Okay, it's 1987. You're like 43 years old. So what, did you get married right out of high school, and then she was pregnant and you guys were married and all that? So she's been a stay-at-home wife for 20 years? Because that's what it sounds like. Your oldest daughter is like 21. So, yeah, he's a POS. And if you know me, if you've been around the channel, you know that I cannot stand infidelity, partially because it ruined my family. And so when it shows up in stories, and in one, it's romanticized, or 2, it's, the infidelator is considered the victim, like this guy, I lose it. Okay, because we got characters in here that are like, oh, he's such a good guy. He's a little depressed, but he's such a good guy. Bitch, he cheated on his wife and shit talks his daughters, and now he's like, you know what, maybe I should quit my celebrity job so I don't have to pay alimony or child support. I lived that. You make this guy your character, I'm going to despise your book. Like, there is nothing you can do. He could be the most charming bastard ever. This is one of your main characters. And that's where I'm at. But do I think that the author is condoning this? I don't freaking know. I put it on the credit of the character, because I think that I don't think that there is a way to control how readers respond to anything and how seriously they take it. Because we've even seen people react to actors just playing a role on TV or in movies, and then being attacked by fans of the show who are treating them like they are the evil person. And that's not really how that works. So there is some level of inability to separate fiction and reality. This is way off track for your question of how do you do it without second guessing. So at some point you just have to say, look, I don't care what that other audience is. And I especially think that when you're in your writing, revision, and editing phase where it's just you looking at it, don't worry about what other people think. Write your characters as truthfully as you can. And then when you get your first readers to help you see if you were successful in portraying those characters, then see how it comes across. You're not always going to be able to show in the story that they are bad people. The thing with Dalen is, let's see if I can figure out how to say this. There are like 2 or 3 ways that I can think of that you can try to mitigate the response to those bad characters. Number 1 is that outside of the book, if you are posting about it, if you're talking about it, let them know that you just disagree with that character. That character is evil. One of the things that I think has come up with Dalen is that the author won't take a specific stand on saying Dalen was wrong. Like, in the end, Dalen was still wrong because he couldn't repent. He wasn't repentant. And I know that the book set out to try to repent, but it just didn't work because he only cared about himself inwardly. He wasn't asking his victims for acceptance or for forgiveness. He was telling them, no, I am forgiven because I have chosen to forgive myself. That's not how that works. But so try to review what you're doing. And I think secondary eyes that are actually going to be honest with you will help you see if you're failing. Sometimes you can think that a character is really great and you love that character, but you hand it to another person and they don't like that character or think something is off. And they might not have the prescriptions that work. But if they feel like something is off, they might be onto something to help you know that you need to add something in there for that character. Another way to show that your evil character is meant to be evil and it's not about like your thoughts or to be taken in a different way is to show consequences to those choices. And sometimes it's stuff like, you know, the death penalty or something extreme. Another way is if you look at American Psycho, when you get all the way to the end with Patrick Bateman, he's not in jail, he's not captured, but he is lonely and he is insane because of the disassociation. He tried so hard to be seen. Everything that he did throughout the book, he tried so hard to be seen and he just couldn't be noticed. And he's just kind of floating in loneliness there at the end. And so the where people end up kind of shows if they've made good or bad decisions, and it might be bittersweet, or it might be tragic, or maybe the character in the end, conquered and they're freaking evil and they made it to the top, because sometimes bad guys win. And that's when you, as the author, just talk about this is the story of a villain that gets to the top, because that's also fine. It's kind of just recognizing what the character is that helps that. And then obviously the third way to show that a character is evil and meant to be evil or a bad guy is they go against what is obviously good and then they lose. My recommendation to avoid stacking things in stories like this is also to avoid stacking people with bad things or dog whistles for this is a bad guy, like bad guy coding. Freaking Grady Hendrix did this in the vampires, the book club, the Housewives book club for vampire slaying, where the vampire had an obsession with World War II and Nazi Germany. And so did the Sun for some reason. I think that's just because it's a common obsession at some point. Or in Sam Fenna's book, Amygdala, where every time he would talk about like a kind world or a world of giving or like medicine, all of the characters that were basically a stand-in for communism, or not even just communism, but a kind world and law and order, it would add for the greater good, because that was a dog whistle of this is a bad opinion. Know that this guy is bad. It's in there so much, even when it's nonsensical. So I would recommend having characters fully believe in who they are, be who they are, let them make bad decisions, don't protect them from bad decisions. And I say this knowing that like Bodymore has Joey, who is a complete hot mess. She makes so many bad decisions, and it makes everything worse. Honestly, every bad decision she makes comes with consequences. It's when she's making good decisions that she is given another chance. There's even a point when her boyfriend, who really loves her, is like at his wit's end because this girl keeps lying to him, keeps running off, keeps going to her best friend, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And she has to make decisions to choose him over the best friend, or else they're done. And you can, I like to think, people can tell me if they've read it, but I like to think that you can see that moment of decision making. And then even if it hurts, let those decisions have consequences. I cannot tell you how many times I've read a book where the author shows their hand by shielding their characters from the consequences of their actions. Again, since we traveled so far from this question, you just wanted to know if you wanted to know if I had any thoughts on how to manage the fear so that you can start writing without second guessing what you're doing so intensely. Write without thinking of anybody else. Write your characters as truthfully as you possibly can. I always like to go back to Sanford Meisner on acting methods. And I gave that book away a while ago because somebody wanted to get into theater, and I was like, this is a good book. Study the Meisner method because it affects me in the way that I write. And I think it was very helpful for me to learn about the Meisner method and then apply it to writing. And Sanford Meisner had a quote that was something like, acting is about truthfully responding under imaginary circumstances. And that's what your story should be. Get to know your characters, learn who your characters are, and see how they respond to these situations and let them just be that. I think that it can get really overwhelming to think of like technique and audience and what other people will think and how people might respond and if people are going to hate you when you're still trying to craft, because then you'll have all these fears and emotions in your head. But guess what? Nobody has to read what you're writing until you are ready for them to read it. So I think the most powerful thing that you can do for yourself when you're crafting your story is forget about everybody else until you're at the point when you're looking for beta readers or handing it over to your second readers to get feedback on how your story is interpreted. Until that point, just focus on what you need to do for you. Nobody is going to see it. Let it be cringe if it needs to be cringe. Let it be terrible if it needs to be terrible. But most importantly, as you do that, as you shut everybody out, listen to your characters. Listen to what they need. Listen to who they are. Listen to what motivates them and encourages them and makes them want to do things. And this can make them do stupid things. It can make them do evil things. I have some evil characters that are not even just the ones in Dead End Drive. Like the ones in Dead End Drive all have their own motives. I've got other ones like in Cain and Abel, where Cain and Abel is entirely selfish reasoned, but the characters don't know what they're doing is wrong, even though we as the readers can see what they're doing is wrong. Nobody in there confronts Cain or Abel about what they're doing because they think that they're in the right. because they're doing what they feel like they need to do for themselves. So shut out everybody else. The only voices you should be listening to as you draft your story are your voice and the voices of your characters. Then get opinions on how it reads. Not so much as having people fix things for you, but use other readers as kind of a temperature check to see if your ideas came through. And then recognize that if your characters are evil, then be okay with saying that they're evil. And know that no matter how hard you try, you will still have people that read your book differently than you intended, because that's just the nature of reading. And that's also okay. What you want to aim for is the majority of the time they see it correctly, though. Or the majority of the time people are seeing what you're putting down, even if they see it in a different way. Also, just you'll learn to be fearless and persevere through the doubt. One other thing to remember as you go forward with writing is to make peace with the fact that you will not be able to please everybody. There will always be tropes or stories or characters that people just don't like. And no matter how much you love them or you cherish them or how much thought you put into them, they are just not going to be something that somebody likes. And that's fine, because they're going to like things that you also don't like. So if you just make peace with the fact that you can't please everybody, you're doing the best that you can for that character, and there are going to be the people that love that character and the people that don't love that character, and just do the best that you can to be truthful about that character, then that's all that you can really ask for. And just know that when somebody has a response to your character, it's not personal and it's not about you. Like my response to Dave, what's his face, or all of the characters in this Shopping Network book that I'm reading right now, it's not personal to the author. It's just, I'm going to have my experiences. And in the same way that if you read a book and you're going to dislike characters, it's tough as the receiver of the information, but you are not the only one, and it's going to be okay. Okay, I see a couple articles in the suggested topics that are also about generative AI. So next week I will do a video talking about some of the other topics submitted for generative AI and the things that I have found for generative AI. So expect that again next week. But I will end on this question that does concern generative AI, which is, I've been looking for artists with similar or more critical views than my own to give me an honest take on something that I'm struggling with myself. I have a very small YouTube channel, just under 1K subs, and I have been working for 8 months on world building and writing a TTRPG setting book designed by the system Neural, but built around DnD 5e. I'm hoping that you're familiar. If not, I'm not familiar at all with DnD. I can't draw, but I'm also one of the plebeian paychecks to paychecks kind of people, so I've been using AI in an art book. I'm not going to sell it. I've been open about releasing it for $0 because I'm not comfortable profiting from AI art, even if it's on something I wrote and built myself. I can't afford to pay an artist yet. I'd like to, and I see this as a stepping stone toward being able to do that. And the growth that it might be to my burgeoning community could result in revenue, and that's what I'd like to pump into paying an artist for a next project. My perception is that AI art, whether we like it or not, is here to stay, and I see it as a stepping stone for me to get to the point where I can afford to pay someone to participate in my projects. I have a full-time job that pays my bills, and I'm passionate about what I'm doing here, but don't have any means to release it in a presentable way. The alternative is not paying an artist, it's not making the thing, which is profoundly depressing. Anyway, I'm curious what you think about it. So I understand where your conundrum comes from. A lot of people, especially the AI bros that I've run into, tend to think that a lot of artists are not working day jobs. Personally, I am working a day job. I work a regular houred day job, and I do this. And I edit my own videos, which is why they're kind of sloppy sometimes. I'll apologize. I am a one-man show, and I do the live streams, and I write books, and I try to draw, and I'm trying to learn a language. And I've got house stuff, and I got to take care of my dog, and I've got normal life, and I have all of this other stuff, but I also work a day job to afford to pay my bills. And I could tell you I am in the red every month as well. I understand not having money, and I have been working my buns off for years thinking that maybe I'll get ahead someday. I'm like, I'll put out a book, and hopefully that book will help me get to the next level and make a little bit of money maybe to help me pay stuff, and then the price of living just keeps going up, and guess what? My paycheck ain't going up, that's for sure. So I understand living paycheck to paycheck, and I understand working to pay the bills and then trying to do this other thing and make this thing possible. But I also don't think that it is ethical to use other people's work that you know is pirated, that you know is stolen, to promote yourself. And there was a time a year and a half ago, generative stuff was coming out, the machine learning was coming out, and most people really didn't know how it worked or where it was coming from or how it was trained. And at this point, there's a lot of information out there, including the corporations themselves, saying, yeah, we take this stuff and then we feed it into this thing and then this is how it works. And so it's difficult for me to agree that this is fine, even as a stepping stone, because you're saying that you are willing to use other people, to use unethical means, to find a way to get to the next step to make money. Even if you're not making money now, you want to use other people's stolen labor and stolen property in order to build a reputation for yourself, in order to make money in the future. And I understand the difficulty of it's not paying an artist, it's just not making the thing. There has to be another way to get around it, whether it is making acquaintances or working with other people in a way to trade skill sets, or setting a little bit of money aside every time, or using free assets that are already in existence as opposed to using generative AI. Because still, this is saying that your project and your growth is more important than the ethics of that art that is stolen, that has people losing their jobs everywhere. Is you're still willing to use that for your benefit, as long as it gives you a benefit. That's the bottom line. And I know that it's a difficult place to stand. I was in a position earlier about people that I was doing work with, asking about them using generative AI for promotional materials of something that I was involved in, and I said I wasn't comfortable with it. This was like a year ago, and I know that it can make a startup more difficult. I also think that the question needs to be asked, do you value artists? Do you think that your work should be valued? Because personally, I just bought a book a couple weeks ago when I was on Amazon because I wanted an easy read, something simple and probably stupid after I finished Amygdala, because Amygdala was a beast. And then I find out that the cover was generative AI, and I felt cheated. I felt disrespected. And there is a large number of people in different genres, specifically in horror, that are abusing the generative AI covers. I think it's disrespectful to the readers. I think it's disrespectful to other authors. And if your cover or if your art in a book is using generative AI, then I can't know that your writing also wasn't using generative AI. Personally, I also can't see it that if you tell me that you are okay with violating other people against their will, because there are so many artists that have been stolen from that have openly said, don't do this, and how much it is hurting them. I personally cannot respect somebody's efforts on a public product that openly uses other people to build its platform. And so then I can't follow you in future, because you can say, I'm not going to use this in the future. How am I supposed to trust you? In this kind of case, for me, I see it as a reputational issue, because you are building your reputation, you're building what people can expect from you. And if you build the foundation of what people can expect from you as generative AI, then why would I expect you to use anything else in the future? You're asking me to trust you in something that you haven't done yet, and that you're going to switch off using generative AI in the future when you're making money, as opposed to pocketing the extra money that you make on a future product. I'm just going to support people that don't abuse the artists. I am never going to give my time or support to people that are using generative AI if I know that it's happening. And I think the number of people that are willing to exploit others in order to use them as a stepping stone and then say, at some point, I'll stop exploiting and then I'll start giving back. No. As you said here, I think whether we like it or not, generative AI is here to stay. With a perspective like that stated, why should I believe that you will ever stop using this system? You just said that the technology is here to stay and you're going to be making money and building a platform on expectation. So tell me, why should I trust you when you say that you'll stop? Not only that, but I feel like even more of an idiot now. This is Ian in editing, by the way. But I visited the YouTube page mentioned on this comment, and I saw videos talking about writing and world building with ChatGPT and using Midjourney to generate the maps. So how much of your thing is even made by you? How much of your writing is even made by you? Because you've shown publicly that you do the world building with ChatGPT. So I don't know how much of this book is actually you and how much of it is you role-playing being a creator of a D&D game. And I'm not trying to be mean here, and I'm sorry if this sounds harsh, but you're trying to sell me a product and buy my support from the exploitation of authors and artists, and then build your platform on that. And yeah, you are selling a product. You can say that it's free, but you have a Patreon to support this, a Ko-fi to support this. You're selling the work and laundering it through by donation. It reminds me a couple of weeks ago when someone posted on one of my generative AI videos asking about breaking writer's block with ChatGPT, and the answer is no. People for generations, since the dawn of man, have been beating writer's block on their own without a computer finishing their thoughts, without exploiting others. Granted, some still have exploited others by seeing what they can steal and getting away with it in various places, but I digress. There are ways to break writer's block that actually require using your brain and being a creator. Outsourcing thought is role-playing creativity and problem solving, and a generative system can never write your characters or world as truthfully and accurately as you, unless they're stock characters. And a stock idea that literally anyone can just fill in the blanks for isn't unique, in which case, I'm not interested in just some stock idea. The voice in art, what makes yours special, is that you are the only one that can make what you are making with the voice that you're making it with the experiences that you had, with the perspective that you have that no one else has, with a combination of your influences. That's what makes it special. If you don't involve yourself, if you outsource the creativity, especially the problem solving, which is where your characters are going to shine the most, where your world building shines the most as being unique to you, then there is no value. If you put your ideas into a machine to fulfill it for you, I'm sorry, but that's not creating. Whenever you put your ideas into a machine to finish it for you, your identity is being washed off of it and it comes out not you. I hope people get this into their heads. This isn't you. You're selling a counterfeit of someone else's work and then calling it your own, and you're not learning how to do anything yourself. You're not learning how to talk to artists, how to communicate, collaborate, write, draw, nothing. And there are so many different skills involved in this, in working with other people, in trying to find the resources that you need, and instead it's just this laziness. And it's really sad. Additionally, I saw this tweet that said another well-established artist in animation started mucking around with generative AI and told his followers the tech is here and that's the way it is. Sounds a lot like the commenter. Funny how for the last 2 years your peers have been moving mountains, getting lawsuits going, pushing regulations, raising money in grassroots efforts, learning about the tech, building networks within the science and tech industry to find ways to combat predatory generative AI, while you've done absolutely nothing and said nothing until now, only to set the community back with the defeatist words. Either help the future of the art community and the security of the internet, or kindly retire and move out of the way. The rest of us have work to do. So I don't know why you think that I'll believe you when you say that you'll switch over to paying artists later, when you say the tech is already here, so you might as well use it. You're already defending it. You're already a defeatist. You're already exploiting it. So why would you switch over, and why should I believe you when you're going to actually end up making money? This wouldn't be such a problem if you were using royalty-free assets or temporary assets gathered legally or paid for other assets, or if generative AI wasn't built off stolen work. But that's the problem that many people seem to ignore. I'm not against every little thing. However, I am against the fact that it is built on stolen artwork, that it is built on stolen effort, and that is taking advantage of stolen effort, because you're saying, well, it's already done, so might as well. I guess there are a lot of things that are already happening, so I guess you might as well use them despite the illegality of it, right? Use free assets, use ethical assets, and don't call yourself an artist if you're not the one doing the work. Of course, there are different types of artists, but if you're not the one writing, then you're not a writer. If you're not the one drawing, then you're not an artist. You're saying it's not that big a deal. I'm poor. I should just be able to use it. That's the first step that's a normalization. If it works the first time to sell your product, then why wouldn't it work the second time when you can actually make money? So that's going to be a moral and an ethical line for you. For me, I can't support anything that uses that. Ultimately, what you're looking at is a decision that you just have to make for yourself. Where is the line? What is something? Do you want your stuff to be valued? Do you want your stuff to be valued by the people that don't value generative AI? Because that might be something that kills the interest in becoming a supporter of you for some people. Because like, I know I'm not supporting that stuff if I know better. I want to go back to your comment that said, it already exists, so why not use it as a stepping stone? The same thing can be said for people and authors specifically that write a bunch of pornography and then publish that in order to make money and build a base, because there is a level of sexual addiction in the reader community. I personally believe. I think you can see it especially when people are picking up books looking for the smut and then putting it back down. You can also see that there is obviously a market for this, especially in the dark romance and in the extreme horror, where people don't care about the quality. They just want to see how extreme you can go and the kind of titillating scenes that you can make. That is an option. However, if you lean into building your base, building your readership off of porn, then when you write a real book that you actually care about, you're going to have to start at zero, because the readers of your porn are not necessarily going to be the readers of your high magic fantasy book or your sci-fi book that you actually care about. These are different readers, and they believe in different things and they want different things. So when it comes to your generative AI tabletop thing, you're going to have to think of, are the people that I am courting to follow me, they don't care about generative AI, which is why they're okay with supporting me. So will I be able to transfer that over into these other ones? Will those people care? Will it matter enough to me to switch to hiring a real artist when it means that you're going to lose money by doing that where you didn't before? You're going to have to pick what matters to you, and it's your moral quandary, and it's what you're willing to do. But personally, just like with the porn thing, I'm not going to write porn in order to make money, no matter how desperate I get. I'm not going to add to what I personally believe is an issue by flooding the market with a genre that I don't like and I think can actually be poisonous to the mind. And that's not saying that other people can't go and read porn or that anything is going to happen to it, but I'm not going to add to the problem. And I think that's what it comes down to with generative AI, is if you want to take a stance against it, then you can't also say, well, I'll stand against it except for me using it to get ahead, because that's what everybody else is also doing. Is you have to determine what is your line, where are you willing to stand, and know that when you make a choice to build your audience off of it, then you're going to have a specific audience, and it may lock you out of having other audiences who believe that I can't support somebody that did this, because if they did this with their startup project, how am I supposed to believe they didn't do this with other projects? How am I supposed to believe that they actually wrote their own stuff? That all comes into question. Your credibility, your future projects, all of it come into question for future audiences, and your audiences are not necessarily going to be transferable if you build it one way and then change your content into doing something else. So you're going to have to make some decisions on what you want from your future as opposed to what is currently expedient. Not only that, but are you okay, if you think that it is a bad thing, are you okay with lowering your morals and doing something that you may say is wrong if it gets you forward now? That's not something that I want to do. That's not something that I want to build my reputation on or put any of my stories through. And that's ultimately what you're going to have to do for yourself. Not to mention that this comment here in your video says, this book will be available in my Discord in December for $0 on a pay what you want, when you want, if you want model. That is how I run my channel. I give people feedback on their work. I share books. I read people's books by recommendation by the author themselves. And I work on donations, so I don't put anything behind a paywall. This is all my own work and all my own efforts to also share my stuff, but also to share other people's stuff. And that's on a donation. So you say that you're not making money off of other people's work, but you are, especially when you've got enough subscribers to also be paid by YouTube. So you're building on the backs of other people. And that's all that I can say with that. Is I hope that you find a different way, but it looks like you've already moved ahead with this. So there's not much really more to say. I don't know if that video was very helpful, but I hope that I was able to address some of these things. There were also a lot of recommendations for books in the responses or in the submissions, and eventually I'll check those out, but I do have to catch up on my backlog that is piled up because Amygdala was so long, right? As you know, it's over, and you got the first half of the review on Thursday. Second half is going to be next Thursday, but now I'm catching up on things. So once I get that actually caught up, then I can start looking into other recommendations. But for now, I'm in a bit of trouble. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
The only people who should come are those who want to meet their monsters.
If this is what Agatha wants, I don't know how we can even dispute it.
I change lives, baby.
And I end them. Sweetheart, no bargains hold. Only fools know restraint.
Only losers lose!
I've been under the knife so many times, I'm practically immune to it.
If your scissors are dull, may I recommend sharpening them with leather?
I think I hit you.
Mimal says I must have a guardian angel.
To enter the ring but abstain from playing is suicidal. Your virtue makes you nothing but a liability.
You're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die.